Chapter 16, Section 2, the Korean War. So the big thing to be paying attention to is how did President Truman use the power of the presidency to limit the spread of communism in East Asia. And this is going to have some impacts on things down the road. So the first thing we'll look at is how Mao Zedong and the communists gained control of China, and then the impact that's going to have on our foreign policy, the causes and the progress of the war in Korea, and then some of the long-term effects of the Korean War on the United States. So when we look at China, China had been in a civil war before World War II. We were supporting Chiang Kai-shek of the National Forces, and we were hoping that he was going to defeat Mao Zedong of the Communist Forces. During World War II, because of the invasion of China, these two people put aside their differences and they somewhat worked together. Now what happens throughout World War II is that the fortunes of this civil war changes. Before World War II, it looked like Chiang and the nationalists were going to defeat the communists. However, because Japan takes over the big cities, that's where most of the nationalists were located. Most of the nationalists did a lot of the direct fighting with Japan. They come out of World War II weaker than they went into World War II. The other thing that starts happening is after World War II, the Soviets are going to put all kinds of money into supporting Mao and helping him hopefully win. The U.S. supports Chiang. The problem is, instead of using that money to beef up his military to help make major changes in foreign policy, he takes that money and he puts it to his own personal use. He gives it to his friends. He gives it to his family. So our money, in a lot of ways, gets flushed down the toilet. Well, with that in mind, it's no surprise then that the communists win in China. And what the American people demand to know is who lost China? Who was it that's responsible for the most populous country in the world becoming communist? The other thing it does is it shores up our belief that communism is going to spread around the world and that we need to do a better job of containing it. So when we look at how Korea gets involved in this, Korea had been under Japan's control. After World War II, the Soviet Union takes control of North Korea. The United States takes control of South Korea. We set up a democratic government. We get them going in capitalism. We help South Korea rebuild a little bit. And when we kind of feel like things are going along pretty well, we are going to withdraw from South Korea and hopefully things go pretty well. Well, through Soviet support, the North Koreans invade South Korea. And within a few days, they've not only captured the capital city of Seoul, but it looks like they're going to pretty much take all of the Korean peninsula. So the U.S. is really concerned about this because China had fell. Now it looks like another country is going to fall to communism, and we need to step up our game and we need to get some things done. The U.S. goes to the United Nations and asks for a UN peacekeeping mission to get into Korea to help them out. And when we look at how this whole thing shakes down, it went to the UN Security Council. The delegate from the Soviet Union was gone because he was protesting the fact that the United States wouldn't formally recognize the communist-controlled government in China. And that happens to be the time that the U.S. is going to push this through. There's no one there that's going to veto this now because Russia's gone and everybody else is allies of the United States. And so he gets this UN peacekeeping mission done. Now, in terms of how this impacts the powers of the president, is we are now sending U.S. and sea forces to support South Korea without a formal declaration of war from Congress. So now presidents can go through the UN or they can use other measures to initiate wars without the prior approval of Congress, which is it is unconstitutional. The UN peacekeeping mission is going to select MacArthur to be the leader of this. He is going to launch a pretty aggressive and assertive invasion north of where the communist forces are located. So he's going to land forces here at Ishan and also forces at Pusan, and then they're going to drive the communist forces out of South Korea. Once they've kind of accomplished that and driven them past this 38th parallel, which was the dividing line between North and South Korea, the question becomes now, what do we do? For MacArthur, he believes we should just drive all the communists out of North Korea, take control of the whole Korean peninsula, and if need be, China as well. China issues a warning. If you get too close to the Chinese border, the Yalu River, at that point, China's going to get involved in the war. So MacArthur does drive these forces to the Yalu River. Once North Korean forces cross that Yalu River, China launches a counterattack and pushes the UN peacekeeping mission all the way back past Seoul and past that 38th parallel. And eventually we are going to counterattack and get this forces back across the 38th parallel again and kind of back to where the borders were before. And this is going to cause a conflict between Truman and MacArthur. Truman wants a limited war. He wants to accomplish this peacekeeping mission. He wants to get South Korea free, and that's really all the further that he wants to go. Whereas MacArthur is a general, and he believes there is no substitute for total victory. As a matter of fact, he sees this as an opportunity to get rid of our China problem as well. Give me nuclear weapons, give me the full force of the U.S. military, and let's invade China and take them out. And he goes very public with this, feeling that Truman is making him fight with his hands tied behind his back. And Truman ends up firing MacArthur, which sets off a whole big debate in the United States about who's right, MacArthur or Truman. This Korean War and the stalemate that's going to take place is going to become a political issue. So when General Eisenhower runs for president, one of the key issues he's campaigning on is that he is going to end the war. And one of the ways that he's going to do this is through his policy of brinkmanship. He really believes that you need to take a lot of these foreign policy issues and take them to the brink of war. That you need to use that threat to force people to kind of give into what it is that you want them to do. Now, the problem with that brinksmanship is it's going to bring us to the edge of war an awful lot of times, and really it's a policy of who's going to blink first. It's kind of like a game of chicken, and that's kind of a dangerous game to play. So when we look at the lessons from the Korean War, what's going to end up happening is Korea is going to stay divided like it was before, North Korea communist, South Korea democracy. What it tells future presidents is that you can go to war without getting congressional approval. And the other lesson that we're going to find is that now the United States is going to spend even more money on defense spending and military spending. So you can kind of see this high point during World War II. It takes a big dip, and then once the Korean War takes place, it's going to go up, and it's going to stay pretty high for quite a while. It isn't going to be until really the 1980s and then really the fall of the Soviet Union that it's going to really kind of dip down. The other thing is we are still in Korea today. We've had troops in Korea not since 1952, but since the start of the war in 1950, and we still patrol the 38th parallel. And the other thing is this has set up the kind of the current world where North Korea is causing problems for the United States, and we're trying to deal with what to do with this kind of outlier of a country that has nuclear technology. And so North Korea is still a foreign policy problem from the United States to this day.